Welcome to the first ever Elite Sports Fantasy Guru NASCAR Podcast. I'm your co-host, Rich Maletto, with my buddy, Sean Engle.
That's right.
Welcome. Sean, so I got to know, man, I'm assuming you watched the duels tonight. I just need a thumbs up, thumbs down, both races.
I'll say thumbs up.
I got to say, I'm with you. Double thumbs up. We didn't have a bunch of nasty wrecks or anything, and we'll get into the duels here a little bit, but hey, it was fairly clean, but we saw some good action. Couple of things that were a little rough, but hey, overall, man, it was great to see some cars back on the track beyond just a car going around all by itself.
Oh, definitely there, Rich. It was just a lot of fun to watch, especially knowing how the super speedway package here with Daytona, we were seeing drivers coming and going straight to the front, to the back, a lot of shuffling around, and overall, there was quite a few interesting observations that we could make that we'll definitely get into as we go into the show today.
Absolutely. First things first, we kind of want to let everybody know what the plan here is, what our process is. This is a new launch. Sean, this is also a little bit outside of our norm for me and Sean. Sean's usually the genius behind the screen. I'm just sort of the guest that comes in and rambles and looks like a fool at times. This will be a little different, hopefully. The plan is to bring some excellent betting and NASCAR fantasy DFS, specifically insight. If we start getting a lot of questions or people want us to talk about some of the other types of leagues out there that are on like NASCAR, where you pull in drivers in and out of garages, some do salary caps year long. So there's lots of, honestly, one of my first experiences with fantasy was NASCAR, Sean. I don't know about you, but we was with my grandpa on a website with Mark Araro, if I remember correctly. And that's got to go back to mid 90s.
Wow. That's bringing it back right there.
Well, I'm a little old, and my family has always liked to gamble a little bit. Like I remember making Super Bowl bets with my grandpa when I was like 8, learning life lessons about paying your dues and not being so confident type of thing. But yeah, so Sean and I will be talking lots of NASCAR. We'll be posting in Discord. We hang out in Discord. I believe, I can't promise this, but I believe this podcast is going to be available for free. That's kind of our thought process. But come over to FantasyGuru.com, subscribe. We have an insane all-inclusive package right now for NASCAR, NBA, NHL. I don't believe baseball's in it, but USFL or XFL or whatever the combined new spring football league is. Pretty much everything under the sun that's not NFL right now. I'm pretty proud of our action here on NASCAR, but I can speak very highly to Fincy and Mans and Ted on the NCAA and the NBA and Jorge Pucks, and man, we got soccer. I hear all good things about the footies. We got Happy on the horse racing. Sean, have you ever tried to talk horse racing with Happy by chance?
Not in my life so far. I'm not really that much into horse racing.
I'll be honest, man. I'm such a degenerate with racing. I miss the speed vision because I would come home, watch snowmobile racing, ATV racing, trophy truck racing, motocross. I'd even get into the monster trucks. If it went somewhere and was running, I'm all for it, man. Horses. I'm willing to bet in a previous life I was probably obsessed with horse racing for all I know. But horse racing's fun. There's a lot of lingo, and it's probably the same for NASCAR. We just know it, right?
Oh yeah.
Check out the Discord over there. Happy will set you straight. He is more than willing to teach anybody. I just want to buy the guy a beer or bourbon and sit down and talk some horse smack with him. Be a good time.
So, Happy just goes over there and makes people happy by winning money. There you go.
That's pretty much what he does. That's pretty much what he does, man. And, I want to give a shout out to DFS Mark. He's always spoke very highly. He's in the Discord. He is very good at DFS. He is a very, very savvy DFS player. His spring football insight is bar none, hands down the best. I want to give him a shout out as well because he's been very supportive of the NASCAR product. And we're really looking forward to the podcast. We want to use this kind of let you know what's going on for the weekend, give you some highlights, maybe some highlights and takeaways from previous races and highlighting the upcoming race, previewing it. And hopefully the plan is to make everybody some money, right, Sean?
That is the plan, my man.
All right. Well, let's talk about the duels a little bit. What do you think?
The duels, Very interesting. And, signature classic Daytona style racing. You had all the different sorts of drivers there, all the different manufacturers. Some were going straight to the front during the race. Others were just lagging behind. They would keep shifting back and forth. And it's interesting when you look towards the different races themselves. The first dual race was a pretty clean race despite all the wild shuffling around there. And then the second dual race was kind of a little more of the same, except for that wreck there that happened with about, say, 14 to go. That really changed the whole nature of the race there at the end. So overall, a lot of excitement, a lot we can definitely take away out of this that could apply to the 500. I mean, after all, it also does set the starting lineup for the Daytona 500 overall, and now we know who's in the big show.
One of the great things, it's really tough. I enjoy betting on NASCAR and playing DFS because I feel like once we kind of get our feet under us for the season, there's trends we can start to see. There's things that are very cyclical, right? It's so common to see a team start well, kind of fade, maybe bounce back. A team starts slow, catch fire. We see this year to year. So it's really, Alex Bowman had an interview during qualifying yesterday that really hit on something for me. He's like, look, I haven't launched a NASCAR since Phoenix. That was 8 weeks ago or whatever it was, or however many months. He goes, that's it. Nothing. He goes, we're supposed to go out here. And everybody was talking about hitting their shifts. Everybody was talking about that yesterday. And he says, we got to go out there and hit our shifts. And it just kind of put in perspective. We're going into this blind. We got new noses, actually a whole new car for Toyota, I believe. New nose.
Toyota and Ford.
I thought they said today Ford got the new nose, but Toyota got a whole new car.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Chevy's the same. So we have some insight to there. NASCAR made some changes in the offseason. Other than that, Daytona is great because we actually get a taste of what we're going to see Sunday tonight, right? Like I was mentioning in Discord, we should be looking for the drivers that, as you mentioned before, that came from the back to the forward. I'm not too worried about where they finished, per se. We will be when we start talking lineups, right? But
oh, definitely.
What really matters here is we want to find the guys that are capable of going from the back to the front, right?
Oh, that is for sure. We want to notice how fast they can get there and how cleanly they can get there. And just overall, notice if they're a big factor overall that could play into the finish of the Daytona 500 or not.
So did you see Kyle Busch's interview by chance?
I did catch some of it, yes.
Okay. I found it interesting what he said because, he kind of called his shot a week or two ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he mentioned today that he just felt like they couldn't do anything. He couldn't really maneuver, couldn't go forward. He was just kind of stuck running wherever he was running. We saw the same from the 3-car, in my opinion, in that first race. And I mentioned to a buddy at work, I said, I was a little worried about the RCR cars qualifying so well. Historically, they don't, but they typically race well. We've seen that with Gibbs the last couple of years. And again, the Toyotas didn't really qualify all that well. I just want to mention that as far as single car qualifying. But
after
you wouldn't know that
none of them qualified inside the top 20. Eric Jones was the closest.
Right. Yet, when we talk about where everybody finished and ran tonight, they were a factor in both races the entire night. And even the race where there was only, 4 of them? I think there was only 4 in the second race. And they still were kind of the talk of the show.
Oh, yeah. Toyota, they were a massive deal. They swept both of the dual races. Reddick won the first. Christopher Bell won the second. And even in that second dual race, 3 of the top 4 were Toyota drivers there, with Hamlin in third and Nemechek in fourth. So they made a big statement, and they are here to play. That new car, it's been put on display, and it shows that they can draft and push really well, especially toward when they get behind other drivers. They were just making moves and getting up there quick. Even Bubba Wallace in that second dual race, he led a lot of laps there too. So just goes to show that Toyota, we have to watch that for them this week.
But Bubba looked almost dominant, right? I mean, he really did at the beginning of that duel until the accident. And, we should note Jimmy Johnson's in one of those Toyotas, and he was not in the race on time. He had to race his way in. And up until the little incident that they had, he was running top 5 for pretty much the whole first half-ish, and he started at the back, but first half-ish of that race. And they noted on the broadcast that the nose on the Toyota, part of obviously the change when they went to the new body, was flat. And so now they're able to push. So now it looks like they got race speed and they're able to push. This is something we need to note going forward too, because unlike this race, when we go to Daytona again this summer, when we go to Talladega, when we go to Atlanta next weekend, and again later this year, it's only going to be single car qualifying. So we need to recognize and note, hey, don't expect these Toyotas necessarily to look good in qualifying, but don't let that scare you away from any of these drivers in any of this type of racing.
If anything, it's going to make them even more DFS darlings whenever we get to those other races, because the main difference is we have duels in order to determine the starting lineup. So, of course, they're going to be starting high up in the 500 as a result of that. But when it comes to the other race weekends, when we're dealing with this rules package, where it's just going to be single car qualifying to determine the starting positions, then yeah, you're probably going to start to see more of those Toyotas in the midfield or even back in the pack. So that's going to make them really highly favorable for DFS. It's also going to make them highly rostered in all sorts of contests too. So that's something to keep in mind, even that, or just overall something that we have to watch this year, really.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what it looks like on the intermediate tracks. I think that'll be different. I mean, we've seen that with Ford, right? They typically qualify well at the super speedways. They typically ran well at the super speedways, but they really struggled at a lot of other places where Toyota, and everybody admitted this. Part of the struggle for Toyotas, they've done a great job over the years of working as a team. Toyota's had some of the smaller numbers across all the cars, so it's a little easier to organize and gain agreement with 6 to 8 at most cars, right? 9 is what we're looking at now with Jimmy Johnson being in, and it grew, right? I mean, the Toyota program grew. So it's going to be interesting now that the car is a little more compatible with the idea of having teamwork than what they were dealing with in the past, specifically, at least for the super speedways.
Oh, yeah, that is definitely for sure. And I think that, like I said, we're going to have to keep an eye on Toyota, because the Toyota's already looking this strong as it is through the duels already shows that it's looking pretty promising for them just for the rest of the season.
100% in agreement. So, in fact, we'll talk about some of our favorite drivers here in a little bit. And man, I've got a couple already that it's going to be hard for me to do a lineup without these guys. So, I wanted to talk about betting lines, Sean, but it's going to be pretty tough because I'm pretty sure they're locked right now. I'm pretty confident they're changing them due to the duels. I don't think they're updated yet. When I checked not long before we got on, I wasn't having much luck. So I've got some midweek lines that I mentioned in the article this week. I do that every week. The idea of it is, at least for NASCAR, I like to try to jump on some lines early. NFL is kind of the same way on props, right? As people start betting, the number gets driven up and all that sort of stuff. We constantly are looking for the lines as much as we are the drivers. One of the things that's tough with NASCAR is things are out of our control, outside the driver's control. That accident, for example, that collected all those cars, there was numerous cars that had nothing to do. They were nowhere near the start of it. They had nothing to do with it. And unfortunately, their days came to an end. That's NASCAR. And so it's not uncommon for Sean and I to give you 3, 4, 5 drivers, even sometimes more, and say, hey, take that 20, 30 bucks, whatever it is you want to spend, split it up among them, not necessarily evenly, but hey, because this guy's got a nice line at plus 1,800, let's put 5 here. And the guy, he really is the favorite. It's going to be tough to beat at plus 350. Fine. Put your 10 bucks there. And as long as they win, you're going to break even or grind a little bit above. The idea is that over the long term for the season, we're going to have enough hits and enough consistent hits on a high enough percentage by taking a few shots each week that will be profitable throughout the season. And not to be bragging, but quite frankly, last year, Sean, you had quite the streak for a while, if I remember correctly.
Oh, yeah, that is for sure. Most weeks when it came to predicting just the winners alone in the Cup Series, there were very, very few races that we ended up missing. Usually I would call the group of 4 to 5 drivers just to win the race. always somebody within that group was going to be either really close to winning or just in the winner's circle each and every week. We got a lot of momentum, and this even applied towards the bets I would make in the Xfinity Series races as well. So we're going to keep all that up. We're going to help people go out there and win some green.
Which I apologize. I thought we were going to win some tonight, Sean. I posted 2 bets in Discord. I wasn't as strong on the Austin Dillon one. I was more, man, maybe they've always raced well here. Maybe with some qualifying speed, they found something, kind of hope. I was wrong. He got collected in the wreck. But hey, a $1 parlay was going to pay $120. So I don't hate suggesting that because I told everybody to go little on it. I'm okay having a little skin in the game for $1. And I really thought Hamlin had it won. I mean, I'm sitting there going, please just don't get too far out in front, you know, and he got too far out in front and unfortunately came home third. But hey, it was a sweat until the last turn. I mean, that's about when you knew it was over. Up until that point, you were right there. So
it's always the last turn. Always the last lap or the last turn.
That's how Jimmy got in. Last lap, last turn. Same thing. A little chuck up, and he happened to scoot it forward in the last turn. So right time, right place. That's how it goes. But yes. And I will say this. You can ask DFS Marlin. He swears the NASCAR product that Sean and I put out is the best kept secret as far as a moneymaker on the site. And I will proudly wear that badge, other than I hate that we're the best kept secret, right? Like, yeah. I'll wear that badge, but I don't want to be a secret.
Wear it.
So, yeah, right. So, well, let's talk about some of our, like I said, I wanted to talk about the bets, but I think what we'll do is we'll leave that for Discord this week. In the upcoming weeks, it'll be a little bit easier for us to do this because qualifying won't be going on while we're doing this. The sites won't be updating lines. It's really tough to make some suggestions because I'm very fearful lines moved a lot. I won't be shocked if Denny Hamlin's line shrank a lot. Kyle Busch's line probably fell a lot. I'm not sure Blaney. I'm not sure if his is going to move much now, but now he's probably going to a backup car. So I don't want to just throw out willy-nilly numbers and guess, Sean, but you know what? We do have some pricing. I know qualifying wasn't necessarily updated on like DraftKings or FanDuel's site in the lineup section, but you and I know where guys are at. We can pull up the finishing order. So I'll start with you. Give me your top as you sit today after watching the duels. Who do you have for your top must-have? I got to play this guy.
It is really tough, but overall,
you can give me 2. If you want to give me 2, I'll take 2.
I think you have to have some Toyota drivers in order to really watch out there because they really were just looking very strong. But I especially have my eye on those 2311 cars of Reddick and Bubba Wallace. They looked especially strong there too. Reddick ended up winning the first duel race. He only led the last lap, but he was pretty much in contention for a good amount of the race. Then Bubba Wallace, he led a lot of laps in that second duel race. He has a strong history at the super speedway, so he's definitely one that you have to watch right there too.
So because of where he finished, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get away from Martin Truex. Martin Truex has had bad luck here. Don't get me wrong. But just like Kyle Busch, the story of 19 years being due and all that stuff plays here as well. He had looked the best I have seen him look here in a long, long time. He ran up front. He worked his way up front because he didn't start there. And until that accident happened, when all that stuff got messed up and he just said, "F it, I'm going to the back. I'm not worried about it." I think he knew he had a fast car. I think he just wanted to make sure it was that car. They can bump out the little bent that they got probably in there when he got into the, when that wreck happened in front of him, his nose got punched in a little bit. So I'm going to probably be, I don't want to say all in on Martin Truex, but he's got to be starting once they put it all together somewhere around 28th.
You were close. He's projected to start 27th here.
27th. Okay. Hey, I was not bad for just off the top of the head here, man.
Yeah, off by 1.
Yeah, right. So for me, and especially his price point, he's 8,200 or 8,700. I think he's 8,200. right around that price point, I feel like that's a lock and load anchor play for you. So that's my go-to. That's my automatic I gotta have type guy. But you mentioned Toyota. I want to throw this out here. I have been dogging on Legacy Motorsports. Sean knows this. We talk off air, so to speak, and he knows some of my personal opinions on some things that have been a little clownish, even though he won't call me out on it. But I got to give a hat tip to Legacy. You mentioned Eric Jones. It was the best qualifier they had, right? But yeah, he was really happy with that car. Like he was celebrating that car while driving the car.
Oh, definitely. Both him and John Hunter both looked ended up pretty good throughout their respective dual races. I mean, we mentioned it earlier with John Hunter. He also he was fourth in the second dual race, so he's got a top 10 starting position as a result.
And his pricing's great. Like the biggest challenge I'm seeing building lineups this week is there's a lot of guys that are good values for what we think they can do. Their qualifying position makes them more risky, though, right? Like I like Austin Cindric. He can win this race. He's won this race. He's run well at plate races. But he's also had a DNF, and you get that DNF, and all of a sudden you're getting minus points. You're losing 20, 30 points. Because Austin Cindric's going to start in the top 5. So next thing you know, he finishes 10th or 15th. You just lost 10 points. And there's going to be a lot of lineups with guys in that $7,000 range, right? Because you could theoretically build in my opinion, a very strong with a lot of points differential or position differential points potential with just a bunch of mid-tier guys and leaving a bunch of money in your wallet.
That is very true. And when we're talking about the Fords, you mentioned Austin Cindric there, part of Team Penske. Yeah, those Penske cars are all looking pretty respectable as it is as well, too. You got to remember, Joey Logano, he's on there with the pole position. And Blaney, he was already making a charge towards the front before that wreck in the second dual race there, too. But another thing that has to be mentioned in regards to the whole Penske connection is Front Row Motorsports. This season, yes, they got themselves a technical alliance with Team Penske, and that was on display all throughout Speed Week so far as well. McDowell qualifying second. He was already also in position there to compete for the win in that dual race as well, too. That just already showing a lot of strength. And you also, as a result, you have to also keep an eye on his teammates there for this weekend. Kaz Grala and Todd Gilliland as maybe potential sleeper picks.
Gilliland quietly was right up there at the front at the end of that race, and nobody really mentioned it or talked about it. And he even got kind of dinged up a little bit in that accident when he scooted between the wall and Dylan. Dylan took the worst of it, obviously, but Kaz drove his way up. I mean, they did not. He said it didn't launch well. They had a hard time accelerating, but because of that caution, because they got screwed up on that pit stop, but because of the caution, they were back with the pack. And look, Kaz has run well at these tracks. I've mentioned him in the trucks and one of the Xfinity articles I wrote last year. Kaz has a lot of racing experience. It's mostly road racing and all that, but he's a very talented individual, and he's run well at these tracks before. And it was fun to see him earn that spot. And, Front Row went on record this week and said, we think we're a tier 1 team now. They think with the alliance with Penske, it makes them a tier 1 team. I'm not sold on that yet, just because we may see that level this weekend. That doesn't really, we may see it next weekend for the record, but I want to give it 4 to 6 weeks before I'm willing to really say that. But they've been fast at other times anyway. That's nothing new. I mean, McDowell's won a couple races, road course, super speedway. He's been fast. He's been fast at times on intermediates. So I'm not doubting it. And look, you mentioned that we were talking before the show started. This new car is supposed to help that, right? The whole point of this car was to level the playing field across all the teams. And so, I don't know. I'll call them a tier 1, but hey, I'm excited for what they did today. So I'm looking forward to Sunday at the very least.
Oh, yeah, definitely with Front Row Motorsports. I think they're going to be one of the teams to watch. That technical alliance is something we got to keep our eye on. And even if it's already making McDowell look really good. He qualified second, front row. Only Joey Logano was faster than him in qualifying after all. And you have to remember, he was right up there in the front of the pack in that second dual race before Hamlin got the late block from Hamlin that basically shuffled him back there.
Yeah, he basically said, I'm not wrecking, I'm bailing, I'm not wrecking my car, and I don't care. I ran up front, I went to the back, worked my way back up front. I done proved what I got to do. I'm bringing this piece home in one piece. I mean, that you could literally see that play out on the track. And even Boyer mentioned, hey, he got up out of the way there to avoid that wreck. He was making sure that we weren't going to. He goes, otherwise, we're seeing the same thing we saw in the first duel. So now let me ask you this: who is your favorite cheapie for this week?
Well, if you want to go with cheap drivers, I mean, you definitely have plenty of options, but I was already keeping my eye on the likes of pretty much the drivers that are projected to start around 28th to 30th, which that's Allmendinger, LaJoie, David Reagan, and heck, you could even throw in Todd Gilliland, who's projected to start right behind them in 31st. All these drivers, I think even from the DFS perspective, they all got their respective pedigrees of good finishes at this sort of track with this rules package before. And, I want to also give a tip of the hat to Spire Motorsports. They were looking pretty good throughout these dual races as well. And they were pretty quiet about their performance overall. You have to remember, Carson Hocevar finished top 5 in that first dual race, and Zane Smith snuck there in the top 10 right in that second dual race. And Corey LaJoie, he was already looking very fast before he got shuffled back too. So got to watch for those guys too.
Zane came from the back to the front. Like, he was up in the top 2 spots for a good little while. And then the whole pitting thing and all that sort of stuff. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did throw that out in Discord. And the other one I threw out in Discord that I'm kind of shocked by, at least, and I get, you and I have talked about this team in the past and have our concerns, but Rick Ware Racing, Haley looked okay, and so did Riley Hurst. And I was pretty impressed with both of those guys. Rick Ware has never really looked fast anywhere, to be fair. I've never really noticed them anywhere. And Riley Hurst had that car up in the top 10, top 5. Haley worked his way through the pack. I mean, they talked about him on the broadcast. So here again, this goes back to what you said before we started the show, Sean. There's more parity in NASCAR than we have ever seen in our lifetime.
That is definitely for sure. And even though we know Daytona is the great equalizer, as it is when it comes to drafting it, equalizing all the speeds out there and having all these cars work together, still, there's going to be a lot of parity. And it's just, even the teams that we thought would just be slow enough and maybe just linger towards the back of the pack, they're finding some speed and able to make moves and just go through the field. We saw that with Haley. We saw that with Riley Herbst. Rick Ware is looking more serious, especially since they have that RFK Racing Alliance as well.
And they sold. So did you see some of the charter numbers? Because I did not realize how much Spire paid for that charter. So they paid $40 million for that charter. The highest price paid prior to that was $13 million in 2021. Quite the jump. Quite the jump, considering there is no revenue sharing agreement yet between the teams in NASCAR. There's no agreement yet of continuation of the charter system. I don't know how you completely absolve it at this point, but just quite interesting. And one of those charters that got bought, the $40 million one, came from BJ McLeod's team, Live Fast Racing, I believe it's called. Live Fast
Motorsports.
Live Fast Motorsports. And you know what? BJ McLeod, they did not make the race. But hat tip to that unsponsored team. They, until the whole accident thing, they got a little bent up, they were in the show. They had raced their way up to where they needed to be. And the other drivers in the garage were complimenting, Mr. McLeod. So hat tip to them too. As much as I want to knock on this car, man, it's brought the parity that they've wanted. I can't deny that. It really has.
Oh, yeah. even on that front, you can also tip your hat towards NY Racing with JJ Yaley. They almost made it into the show too.
They had it, dude. They had it. They had it. It was theirs. Jimmy was going to be on the way out. It was, I felt bad for JJ. You could see it. I'm sorry. Jimmy, you've been there, had enough. I'm sorry. You don't need to be out there doing it. You don't. If you're going to run up front and be with those guys, then race the rest of the year. Turn in your Hall of Fame badge and say, I'm going back racing. Quit being half pregnant on this stuff, man. Just saying.
Well, even then, the whole situation, I find it more impressive about the NY Racing thing, considering the circumstances that they were going through just to even have a driver in car.
Yeah, because did you see the back of his driver suit?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It had Biffle's Twitter handle. That whole story's crazy in of itself, man. I mean, yeah, I'm not racing for you. You haven't paid me. Like, you announce he's racing for you, and he's like, yeah, no, I'm not. I mean, but I agree. And look, I actually worked with some of those guys at a truck race years ago. I speak very highly of the FDNY team. They've always been, I mean, they were absolutely great to me. Shout out to all those guys. I do love them, Brent and the crew. So, but yeah. Well, how do you feel about Anthony Alfredo? I keep forgetting to ask you about him, and I want to ask you about him because he just kind of fell to the back because he didn't need to. He was locked in. He has run well at these plate races before, and at 5,200, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, he is also back there 25th or further.
Oh, he's further back. He's projected to start around 35th or so.
Okay.
I'm going to say this right now, but you got to have him in some DFS lineups for sure this weekend. I don't see any way you can go against that when he starts that far back with a team that has definitely shown the capability to, even if they just survive, they're still going to be pretty good for any DFS lineup there.
That's what my thought was. And like I said, he's actually been fast at these style of races before. So I don't think a top 20 is out of the question. I think something like a top 15 would be amazing. But I think a top 20 is fair. And if you're starting 35th, that's 15 bonus points right off the bat, plus the 20-ish or so points you get for finishing there. That takes a $5,200 driver and turns him into a 35, maybe a 40-point player.
Oh, yeah, that is for sure. While we're on the topic, though, of drivers starting far back, we should talk about the drivers that are the big names starting like 30th on back or projected to start on
Let's hear them. Let's hear them.
Austin Dillon, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Busch, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and then you got Daniel Hemrick and Noah Gragson as the last two. So, yeah, a lot of interesting names are starting far back here. And we have to just keep in mind that a lot of these drivers are going to be highly, highly rostered for the Daytona 500 and DFS.
And you know what's interesting? I'm really nervous to play in the RCR cars. Starting that far back, I don't think you can go wrong. But my concern is I don't know if they can race themselves inside a top 15. Blaney, I think, could. Go ahead.
I do think that the RCR cars definitely have enough equipment behind them where they definitely can power themselves back up inside the top 15, maybe even the top 10 if circumstances go right for them.
That's fair. Like I said, I was very disappointed because Dillon has always found a way to race towards the front, and he didn't in Duel 1 and then got wrecked. Kyle Busch openly said they could do anything, and all he did in that second duel was go backwards until that wreck. I mean, he went backwards. Even when he got back up front, it was more due to the pit stops and the timing of that. So I don't know. I'm kind of leaning like as far as, because I do think they're going to be highly owned anyway for tournaments. I'm kind of thinking maybe those are two drivers I want to pivot from because, and maybe I am being over concerned, but look, we've been watching the sport a long time, and I have said it for literally years. When we go to this race, we look at pole times, and we look at the race, I want those guys that qualify in that middle section that we always see towards the front. And like I said, what jumped out to me with RCR, they finally they both qualified in the top 10. that is not common for them at Daytona and Talladega. They just typically don't. They're more 15th, 20th type of thing, like we saw from Eric Jones, like we saw from Hamlin. So with them being so highly owned, and honestly, I'm also a little worried about Blaney because, man, that was quite a lick. And he was definitely in pain. You heard him on the radio. So I'm a little nervous on those guys. I tell you what, I'll people dog on Stenhouse, but I'll take a flyer on Stenhouse all day long at these tracks.
Oh, for sure. Especially considering he was out there leading laps, just staying within the top 3 most of the race. And then when he fell back, he got involved in the wreck there. So
yeah.
Looks very strong.
And he's going to be quite affordable. I mean, of all that group, he's by far the cheapest. Outside of Hemrick and Gragson. I'm probably going to avoid Hemrick. He's not one I've had a lot of success and luck with, even in Xfinity. He's a great contrarian play at certain tracks because he's not a horrible driver by any means. You said this best the other day, Sean. There's certain drivers you can put in and kind of get an idea of how good your equipment is. Hemrick is kind of that guy. You put him in a premium equipment, it's not necessarily going to be the premium output that you want, but it's going to be what the car can do. You get him in kind of middling equipment, he's going to bring you home a middling finish without really kind of tearing up the car usually. But I'm just not on him. And I want to see a little some from Stewart Haas and Gragson before I start jumping on that boat. Stewart Haas has had some challenges, so I'm willing to just kind of contrarian play, pump the brakes overall, but that's not something I'm really looking to chase.
Now, with my opinion on those two in particular, I think I am going to actually put some flyers on them a little bit.
Okay.
If only just because they provide almost no risk towards using them in DFS, and because they're not the flashiest names, I do think as far as putting him in a tournament lineup is concerned, they'd be great for that purpose. Especially Gragson, I would want to say, just because he has Drew Blickensderfer as his crew chief there, and you remember he used to be Eric Almirola's crew chief, and that 10 car would always be very fast at this track type, even within the dual race. He was riding just about mid-pack there, and at times was trying to knock on the door towards the top part of the pack. So can't ignore that fully.
No, that's a really good point, and I forgot that's who his crew chief was. And to your point, Almirola had 2 dual wins. He was, there's only a handful of drivers with multiple dual wins that were even racing the last few years. That's a really good point, and you're right. The amount of risk and cost. See, that's the thing, too. It's like with your point with Alfredo. It's worthwhile to take the chance or the risk or go contrarian because there isn't a lot of risk. All those guys could easily get you 5 points, or someone like Gragson, who is on a top team, could easily be a top 10 finish. Like Alfredo getting a top 10, plausible, yes. Not something I'm highly likely or expecting. Gragson, certainly plausible. Not sure that I'm expecting it, but I wouldn't be shocked by it. Does that make some sense?
Oh, yeah. But even then, those drivers aren't the flashiest names. You don't expect them to win, but just even them having a good day means you're going to have a great day in DFS is my main point.
I guess what I'm getting at is I could see a higher percentage likelihood for Grayson being top 10, top 5 than the percentage of, say, Alfredo doing that. And I think that potentially you're going to have money left over, most likely, if you build your lineups right. I very rarely don't have nearly $1,500, $2,000 left. So you have the luxury of picking more or less who you want. I would rather pay up that little bit more from Fredo to get Gragson, I think. Consider they're both starting within a spot or 2 of each other, for example.
Oh, yeah. It's more like it's expected, I think, a difference between 5 positions for both of them, with Gragson starting 5 positions further back from Alfredo here, according to the projected starting lineup I'm seeing here. So it's those little things that could make all the difference, too.
I would argue that could be a 10-point swing. Like if I think Gragson's 5 positions better at the finish and he's starting 5 positions further back, that's even a bigger bonus, if you will, or a green flag to say, put your stake here.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Well, yeah, you kind of sold me on it, Sean. I told you. There's times that you remind me of things that I'm like, oh, crap. I forgot about that. Like, yeah, I'm sold. I was kind of on Fredo the whole way, but now I'm kind of thinking Gragson, man. But see, you bring up a really good point here. Qualifying positions for DFS lineups is absolutely huge. I can't state this enough. The position differential points are massive. It's 0 or 1 to 45 points or 50 points. The winner gets a couple extra points, but for all intents and purposes, it's 1 to 50-ish with a point of position. There's 40 drivers out there, so 41 through 40. You're getting a bonus point. You know, unlike fastest lap, unlike laps led, which you also get points for in DFS, you only get fractional points. So, yeah, you may have a driver with, say it's a long race with 200 laps. Man, if you got a driver with 20 or 30 fastest laps, that's a pretty good driver that day. You're not getting 20 or 30 points. You're getting like 10 points or 8 points. They lead a bunch of laps that day. Again, you're getting that 8, 10. Maybe if they lead a whole huge chunk, you might get closer to 12, 15 points. But you could easily have someone like a Ryan Blaney, a Dillon, a Busch, a Stenhouse starting there in 38th, finishing 5th, and you just picked up 33 bonus points. Plus their finishing order points. Now, all of a sudden, that driver is a 70-point performer for you.
That could be more than even a race winner on some occasions.
Yes. I mean, that's how DFS goes, right? I mean, people, I think, fall to do DFS NASCAR. I think you have to have a different thought process. You have to be willing to be contrarian to some degree. You and I have talked about this, Sean. It is completely fine to be chalky for 3/4, 2/3 of your lineup. It's almost recommended, especially in cash games, because accidents happen. So if you're a part of the chalk and you get hosed, so does the whole group, and it doesn't matter. What you have to hit on those, you cannot miss on your contrarian plays. The plays you pick at 3% ownership, 6% ownership, they have to at least return on the investment. They have to give you somewhere in the ballpark of what those other high-end contrarian plays will play. They have to. It's the only way you're going to cash. And I think we get kind of fallen in a trap of picking the drivers we think will do well, not necessarily picking the drivers we think that will score well. Does that make some sense?
Oh, yeah. But overall, you still have to make sure that you want to get your lineup of drivers, if you're playing DFS, to be the best possible scorers they can get, too. Every single driver matters.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And quite frankly, to win in the tournaments, you need to have – you can cash and not do this, at least cash okay amounts, but you need to hit on no less than 4, and you really need to hit on 5 as far as top scorers go.
Oh, definitely.
And like, I guess where I'm going with that is, to your point, maybe we don't think Alfredo or Gragson are top 20 finishers or top 15 finishers, just throwing out numbers. The fact of the matter is, because of where they start and their potential points, we need to seriously consider. I guess where I'm going with this is some of those mid-tier drivers that we kind of forget about, you know, having a stars and studs kind of lineup and forgetting about those. You're missing out on some of those points. There can be some of the gross plays that you want to play, but because they start 28th and they're typically a top 15, top 10 guy, those extra 10, 13, 14, 15 points is significant enough in you not cashing. I mean, we've all been there where we're just 1 or 2 points from cashing. Imagine that 15-point swing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But it also goes the other way around, too, with when you think of other drivers that start close towards the front and how big of a contrarian play they could be. I mean, we look at Tyler Reddick, Christopher Bell, for example, starting 3rd and 4th. they don't have much of a high ceiling compared to, like, say, a Noah Gragson or a Daniel Hemrick or an Anthony Alfredo. But, picks like this can also pay out in the right circumstances too. If they're up there remaining with a high finishing position, leading laps and everything, that could pay off too. So overall, when it comes to DFS, you kind of just have to balance it out a little bit. You pick a lot of those drivers starting in the back because those are going to be the chalky plays, but then you usually have a driver or two that starts closer towards the front. Those are your contrarian plays if you want to really keep it more simple like that.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example in my opinion, right? And I hope folks understand this changes from track to track, okay? We go to Bristol, we run 500 laps. Here at Daytona, we run 200 laps, all right? That's significant because obviously leading 200 laps at Bristol is not an oddball thing, to be fair with you. That kind of happens. You could score a lot of dominator points that way with those laps led. At Daytona and Talladega, not only is there half as many laps, or less than that really, there's a lot of lead changes. There's a lot of different leaders. So those dominator points are a lot harder to come by. So some weeks we really will say we got to find our dominators, and other weeks we got to find our gems kind of in the back. For this week, one of those gems for me that Sean's talking about, at least as far as a contrarian play, Austin Cindric. At $7,000, he's very affordable in just about any type of lineup build you do. He's not starting near the back. He's probably not going to be a chalky play. He may be because he's been very good here. I kind of want to dig into this a little bit. He has run well at Daytona. He has run well at Talladega. But with him starting in the top 5, 6, something like that, I don't know that he's going to be very highly owned.
Not as much as some other drivers I would have to anticipate. Like, he's not a Hendrick driver like Chase Elliott starting one position ahead of him there. Like, people think Elliott is going to be in the mix, or somebody like Denny Hamlin who starts 2 positions back compared to Austin Cindric there. I mean, we all know Hamlin. He's really good at these types of tracks there, and he's also won the Daytona 500 3 times after all. He's going to definitely have some rostership behind him as well, too.
And, you bring up a good point, right? Like this is where I say, and I'm even saying me, I've got to do a better job thinking this way, Sean. Yes. Do I think Hamlin would lead more laps than Cindric? Yes. Do I think the likelihood of Hamlin having a better finish than Cindric is higher? Yes. Okay. But for $3,000 difference, and in a tournament setup where I know I have to be somewhat different if I'm going to cash. I mean, the part that people I think struggle with tournament thought process is just because you didn't win or cash or you scored low points doesn't mean you built the wrong lineup, because you have to be different in ways in order to win in a tournament. Jeff talks about it on air. You've heard him on the podcast, the lineup trains and all the same stuff. Okay, so now all 100 of you split $50. Like, what are you doing? Like, how good is that, right? So I'm looking at this going, man, does it really make sense to play Hamlin or Chase, for that matter, Chase Elliott? Or am I better off just throwing Cindric in?
Well, Rich, let me tell you about this little list here that I'm looking up as we speak here about driver averages at Daytona and Talladega combined. This is since February 2021 here, and I'm going to list off the top drivers by average finishing position. First, Ryan Blaney, 11.2. Second, Chase Elliott, 13.3. Third, Bubba Wallace, 14.0. Fourth, Kyle Busch, 15.3. Fifth, Austin Cindric at 15.6. So that just goes to show you, just on Daytona and Talladega alone, that while Hamlin does have the pedigree and the history here, you can't ignore a driver like Austin Cindric for less salary if he also has the recent history on this track type to back it up there too. I mean, 5th best out of all active drivers at this particular track type at Daytona and Talladega only, not counting Atlanta here, since 2021.
Right. Well, I tell you what, let's go a step further. He's only, less than 2 positions, or right around 2 positions less than Chase Elliott, right? On average.
That is, Elliott is ranked number 2 on this list of the active drivers here. Austin
at 13.7, right? Right, but
Elliott is 13.3, Cindric is 15.6.
So 2.3 positions difference is where I'm going with this. Follow me? In NASCAR points, that's 3 points. It's a salary difference. It's a salary difference of over $2,000, right? So I guess what I'm saying here is, especially on ownership, if I knew for sure the ownership is, I'm going to bet it's less than Elliott, to your point, Sean. I think that's fair to say, most likely. My point being is, to building a lineup, that small minor difference, ranking 3 positions, to your point, 2.3 different average finish, $2,000 to $3,000 difference in cost. If I'm looking at market risk, right, that's what we're kind of talking about here. I would argue I'm spending a whole lot less, and I'm kind of gaining maybe not quite the same high-end ceiling, but I'm in the same ballpark, and it's costing me way less, man.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You even want to continue further down this list. Number 6
absolutely.
is Brad Keselowski at 16.8, and then it's Denny Hamlin at 17.1. After that is Michael McDowell at 17.3. Then you have a tie between Austin Dillon and Corey LaJoie at 18.1.
Look at LaJoie hanging there with the big dogs, man. Look at where's our boy Jay at, man. We're gonna have to give him a shout out, and his boy Corey LaJoie a shout out, man.
He's always won the watch at these types of races.
Right.
I mean, you cannot ignore how good he can be. You just can't.
You know, maybe I'll have enough gall this week to actually build a lineup with just the oddball values that I think are out there, and just seeing where, like, not even having a stud in the lineup. Do you know what I'm saying? And just, it'll be a dollar lineup, but just seeing what the heck happens with it. I may actually do that this weekend. I have tempted every year. I say I'm going to do it, and then I chicken out because I have all this money left over, and I'm like, yeah, but I can get Hamlin. Yeah, but I can get Kyle. I tell you what, speaking of Kyles, I was impressed with the Hendrick cars. The Hendrick cars have always shown speed, but they never seem to handle well. You always see them bouncing all over the place in traffic. We did not see that tonight. Not at all. Kyle Larson looked good in front. He looked good pushing.
Oh, yeah, that is for sure. Larson was actually looking pretty good throughout the duel race there. And although he fell back a little bit towards the end, he is projected to start around mid-pack in the 17th position or so. So while I think Larson, due to his history at this track type, he's not one of the drivers that I'm going to be hitting on heavily, I wouldn't be against taking maybe a pick or two on him for a lineup, though. When it comes to the Hendrick cars, in my opinion, the ones that I like best are Elliott and Byron for sure, though.
I would agree with that. I just, again, it was funny when Truex and Larson were up there and the announcers were talking about two guys that had not had any luck, you know, and they both have been fast there at times. I mean, Larson's had some gnarly rides there too. That Xfinity race, you know, years ago. That was rough looking, man. That was rough. But hey, if we could have a whole show dedicated to the wrecks we have seen at Daytona and Talladega that will make your stomach turn.
Oh, that is for sure. That is definitely for sure. Even all throughout history, there is just such an extensive history of some of the most insane wrecks that you can see out there. Absolutely crazy stuff.
Well, Sean, I think we're kind of pushing up on our limit here a little bit. I didn't quite start the stopwatch right on time, as I can't quite tell where I started it, so I apologize. Once again, Sean is normally the guy behind the screen that's like keeping me in check, and I'm trying to do this at once here because we're trying to get Sean's talent on air because, quite frankly, I think he's a great NASCAR mind. He's made people money in the past, so we got to make sure he's here in front of our faces. But this is episode 1. This will improve. We're giving this a go here. You're talking about a couple of I wouldn't say completely inexperienced, but we're no Jeff Mans, we're no Armando Marsal or Russell Clay or Tyler Beaker that are, you know, been doing this well. You've done some of this pretty regularly though, Sean, haven't you?
Oh, I've been in the whole DFS game for a long, long time and just playing fantasy NASCAR since about the mid-2000s. So I know I look like
I'm just talking on like doing the podcasts and stuff. You've been doing writing. You've done writing going way back, right?
Oh yeah, I've done writing and playing in DFS, both season long and DFS Fantasy NASCAR for a long time. But as for me doing the whole podcast thing, I have some experience with it here and there. Just maybe not as much as, say, like Jeff Nance has, for example.
Well, that guy's double dipping, right? I mean, he's got the podcast, he's got airtime on the radio. They just expanded that. Congrats to Elite Sports getting extra airtime. Congrats to Justin Finsterman and Ray Flowers. I'm so glad to hear about their 2-hour show Monday through Thursday.
Yes.
Please check. I wish, Sean, do you know the name of it off the top of your head? It's
I believe it is what? Elite Sports Game Time. I think that's the name.
think you're correct. I think you're correct on that. Fantasy Sports Day. Oh, that's Ray's morning show. Yep, I believe you're correct on that. But I'll get the name right here very soon. I'm looking forward to it. I always love the Fantasy Drive with Kyle and Ray. Fancy always did a great job when he and Ronas did things together. That was always a good time. So I'm really looking forward to Fancy and Ray. I'm glad Jeff got an extra hour. I feel very fortunate. You know, we had that call this week, and I feel very fortunate to be part of the team. I feel fortunate to be teamed up with you, Sean. You've been so great welcoming in. You know, the NASCAR has kind of been your baby long before I ever got here. So kudos to you. Kudos to you for kind of keeping it up and going and making people some money. So I'm looking forward to the season. We've got a lot of fun stuff planned. We're going to be doing the stuff we've done before. We're going to be spending time in Discord. Hey, maybe we can get this live streaming at some point, and we can get active questions. You know, we're not opposed to these things. We aim to please. So for those of you that want to tune in and listen and talk NASCAR, hey, we're all ears. Let's hear from you. Let us know what you want. And we appreciate you tuning in. On behalf of Sean Engle, I'm Rich Maletto. Thank you for tuning in to the Elite Sports Fantasy Guru NASCAR podcast. We'll see you next week.